The Masasi Temple on Yavin 4 had stood for thousands of years, a monument to a forgotten civilization buried in jungle humidity and the chirping of alien insects. Now it served as the Rebel Alliance's primary base, its ancient stone halls filled with holographic projectors, tactical displays, and the nervous energy of people planning something impossible. Carol Danvers stood at the back of the briefing room, arms crossed, watching General John Tadana present the attack plan to a room full of pilots who looked barely old enough to drive, let alone fly combat missions against a battle station the size of a moon. "The approach will not be easy," Tadana was saying, his weathered face grave in the blue holographic light. "You are required to maneuver straight down this trench and skim the surface to this point. The target area is only 2 meters wide. It's a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port. The shaft leads directly to the reactor system. A precise hit will start a chain reaction which should destroy the station." 2 meters. Carol had fought in space battles across 3 galaxies, had precision-targeted Kree warships from orbit, had threaded photon blasts through impossible angles. 2 meters should be easy. "However," Tadana continued, "the Death Star's defenses are designed around a direct, large-scale assault. A small one-man fighter should be able to penetrate the outer defense. Captain Marvel has volunteered to—" "No," Carol said quietly. Every head in the room turned. Mon Mothma, standing beside Tadana, raised an eyebrow. "Captain?" Carol stepped forward, and the crowd of pilots parted instinctively. 3 weeks since Scarif, and she'd become something of a legend in the rebellion. The woman who turned herself into energy to breach an unbreakable barrier. The warrior who'd fought Darth Vader to a standstill. The golden light that the Empire feared. The problem was, legends made for bad teammates. "I've been reviewing the tactical data," Carol said, gesturing to the Death Star schematic rotating above them. "That exhaust port, 2 meters wide. You're sending starfighters down a trench with limited maneuverability under concentrated fire to make a shot that requires perfect precision at high speed." "That's correct," Tadana said carefully. "So why not just let me fly in, bypass the trench entirely, and punch through the hull directly to the reactor?" Carol's voice was reasonable, logical. "I can survive in vacuum. I don't need a fighter. I'm faster than any TIE, and I can take hits that would vaporize an X-Wing. I'd get to the reactor, overload it with a focused photon burst, and we're done. No trench run, no impossible shot, no casualties." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Carol had learned over the past 3 weeks that the rebellion ran on hope and camaraderie, and her suggestions, however tactically sound, often sounded like a woman offering to solve everyone's problems because they weren't capable themselves. "We've considered that approach," Mon Mothma said diplomatically, "but the Death Star's surface defenses include thousands of turbo-laser batteries and tractor beam projectors. The moment you approach alone, every weapon on the station would target you simultaneously." "I've handled worse at Scarif," Carol said. "Scarif nearly killed you," Mothma replied, and there was steel beneath her measured tone. "You survived because Jedi held your molecular structure together through the Force. You reformed in our medbay unconscious for 3 days. If you attempt a solo assault on the Death Star and fail, we lose both you and our only chance to destroy it. And if your pilots fail, you lose them and the Death Star destroys another planet," Carol shot back. "Forgive me for thinking one life is a better risk." "It's not about the numbers," a new voice said. Carol turned to see Kanan Jarrus standing in the doorway, Ezra beside him. The Jedi looked tired, he always looked tired, but his voice carried quiet certainty. "It's about what the Force is showing us. There's someone here who's meant to make that shot. Someone who needs to make it because their entire future and the galaxy's depends on this moment." "The Force," Carol said, and couldn't quite keep the frustration from her voice. "Right. Mystical energy that I can't use, can't fully understand, and half the time seems to be working against me." "Not against you, around you. You're like a stone in a river. The Force flows around you because you're not part of it, but that doesn't mean you're not part of the plan." Carol had spent 3 weeks trying to understand the Force. She'd watched Kanan train Ezra, seen them move objects with their minds, sense things before they happened, connect to each other across distances that should be impossible. After Scarif, after Jedi she'd never met had reached across the galaxy to hold her atoms together, she'd even felt it herself. Not using it, but sensing it, a background hum to reality that her cosmic awareness could almost detect. It was infuriating. She'd faced Kree gods and Chitauri armadas, she'd absorbed the power of the Tesseract and fought Thanos himself. But this mystical energy that everyone in this galaxy took for granted remained frustratingly beyond her reach. "So what's the plan?" Carol asked, forcing her voice level. "I stay out of the way while your pilots make a suicide run?" "You protect them," Dodonna said. "The Death Star will deploy TIE fighters to defend the trench. You engage those fighters, keep them off our pilots' backs. Let them focus on the shot while you handle the Empire's counterattack." It made tactical sense, it did. But Carol had spent her entire life being the one who made the impossible shots, who solved the unsolvable problems. Being told to play support while others took the critical risks felt like being benched in the championship game. "Fine, I'll run interference, but if your plan fails—" "If our plan fails," Mon Mothma said gently, "then we improvise, together. That's what allies do." The word hung in the air. Allies. Not weapons, not solutions, not the golden warrior who fixed everything because everyone else was too weak. Carol had spent 3 weeks with the rebellion, but she was still learning what it meant to be part of something rather than apart from it. The briefing continued for another hour. 30 pilots, Red Squadron and Gold Squadron, would assault in X-Wing and Y-Wing fighters. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its requirements. Navigate the Death Star's defensive perimeter. Dodge turbo-laser fire that could vaporize capital ships. Enter the trench. Maintain formation under concentrated attack. Make a 2-meter shot while traveling at combat speed. Carol watched the pilots as Dodonna explained the tactical details. They were young, too young. Most looked like Ezra's age, maybe early 20s at most. They listened with the focused intensity of people who knew they were probably going to die, but had decided it was worth it anyway. Carol recognized that look. She'd worn it herself once, a lifetime ago, when she'd been Carol Danvers, the Air Force pilot, instead of Captain Marvel, the Cosmic Avenger. After the briefing, Carol found herself in the hangar bay, watching the ground crews prep the fighters. X-Wings and Y-Wings, battered and repaired 100 times, held together by skill and desperation. They looked fragile compared to the massive Star Destroyers she'd fought, like toys going up against Titans. "They're tougher than they look," a voice said behind her. Carol turned to find a woman in a pilot's flight suit, dark hair pulled back, with the kind of confidence that came from surviving too many close calls. "Carol," said Carol, recognizing her from intelligence briefings, "I'm sorry about Alderaan." Leia's expression tightened, but she didn't look away. 2 billion people, vaporized in seconds. I watched it happen. Tarkin made me watch. She stepped up beside Carol, looking at the fighters. "That's why I understand your instinct to just solve this, to use all that power and end the threat yourself. I'd do the same if I could." "But," Carol prompted, "but the rebellion isn't about one person saving everyone. It's about everyone saving each other." Leia glanced at her. "You're powerful, Captain Marvel. More powerful than anyone I've ever met. But power alone didn't stop the Death Star from destroying my home, and it won't stop them from destroying the next planet or the one after that. What stops them is people choosing to stand together, even when it's terrifying." Carol had heard similar speeches, from Steve Rogers about being a team, from Nick Fury about trusting the system. But there was something different about hearing it from a woman who'd lost everything and chosen to keep fighting anyway. "I'm not good at trust," Carol admitted. "I've been burned too many times, used by people who said they were allies but just wanted a weapon they could point at their enemies." "I know the feeling," Leia said. "But look around. These pilots, they're not here because anyone forced them. They're here because they believe in something bigger than themselves. That's not a weakness, Captain. That's the only strength that actually matters." Before Carol could respond, a commotion at the hangar entrance drew their attention. A group was entering, a Wookiee who stood over 7 feet tall, and 2 humans. One was a cocky-looking smuggler type in a vest, the other was... Carol's cosmic awareness pinged. Not danger, something else. Potential, possibility. Like looking at a bomb that hadn't decided whether to explode or save the world. The young man was maybe 19, with shaggy blonde hair and the kind of earnest, determined expression that reminded Carol painfully of Peter Parker. But there was something else, that background hum she'd learned to associate with the Force. Around him, it was a roar. "That's Luke Skywalker," Leia said quietly. "He's the one who rescued me from the Death Star. He and his... friends." She said friends with the tone of someone still deciding if that was accurate. Luke was looking at the X-Wings with barely contained excitement, while the smuggler, Han Solo, Carol recognized from reports, was arguing with a protocol droid about payment. "He's strong in the Force," Carol said. "I can feel it." Leia looked sharply at her. "You can sense the Force?" "Sense Scarif, not use it, sense it, like background radiation." Carol watched Luke examining an X-Wing's S-foils with the fascination of someone who'd never seen them up close. "He's untrained?" "He's a farm boy from Tatooine who decided to join the rebellion about 48 hours ago, but Obi-Wan Kenobi trained him, or started to, before..." She didn't finish. Carol knew that story. Kenobi, one of the last Jedi Masters, had died on the Death Star, sacrificed himself so others could escape, another person who'd chosen to trust instead of fight and paid the ultimate price. "He's going to make the shot," Carol said suddenly. She didn't know how she knew it, but her cosmic awareness, that quantum connection that let her sense energy patterns and probability matrices, was screaming it. When your pilots make the trench run, he's the one who's going to fire the torpedo that destroys the Death Star. "How can you possibly know that?" Leia asked. "I can't explain it, but I'm never wrong about these things." Carol paused. "Which means Vader will be hunting him specifically, and Thrawn will have planned for exactly this scenario." The tactical implications clicked into place like a weapon being armed. The Empire knew about the exhaust port vulnerability. They had to, after Scarif. They spent 3 weeks preparing. Thrawn, with his genius for strategy, would have predicted exactly how the rebellion would attack, and he'd have prepared countermeasures. Not just for the fighters, for her. "We need to talk to your command staff," Carol said urgently, "because I think we're walking into another trap." 30 minutes later, Carol stood before a tactical display with Mon Mothma, Dodonna, and the squadron leaders. She'd pulled up every piece of intelligence she'd gathered on Thrawn's tactics over the past 3 weeks. "Look at the pattern," Carol said, highlighting key data points. "At Lothal, Thrawn didn't try to capture me with overwhelming force. He studied me. At Atollon, he didn't engage directly. He let Vader test my limits. At Scarif, he modified the shield gate specifically to counter my energy signature." "Your point?" Dodonna asked. "Thrawn doesn't fight battles he might lose. He fights battles he's already won through preparation." Carol pulled up Death Star schematics. "The exhaust port is real, but that doesn't mean it's undefended. 3 weeks is enough time to install countermeasures we won't see until it's too late." "Such as?" Mon Mothma pressed. Carol thought about Scarif, about how Thrawn had turned her greatest strength into her greatest vulnerability. Energy dampeners, probably scattered throughout the trench approach, calibrated to my specific photon signature. The moment I enter that trench to protect your pilots, they activate. My powers drop to maybe 30–40% capacity. Suddenly, I'm not a threat, I'm a liability. "But the exhaust port remains," Dodonna said. "Even if they neutralize you, our pilots can still make the shot." "Can they?" Carol asked. "Because Thrawn is smart enough to predict you'd plan for that too, which means there's something else, something we're not seeing." "Or," Han Solo said, and everyone turned to find him leaning in the doorway with Chewbacca, "maybe the Empire's just as overconfident as you are, sweetheart. Ever think of that?" "Excuse me?" Carol said. "You've spent the last 10 minutes explaining how brilliant this Thrawn guy is, how he's predicted everything, prepared for everything." Han shrugged. "But you're also assuming the Empire's perfect, that they don't make mistakes. In my experience, the bigger they are, the more they think they're invincible, and that's when you shoot them in the undefended exhaust port. Carol wanted to argue, but Solo had a point. She'd spent 3 weeks analyzing the Empire's tactics, learning their patterns, and maybe she'd started giving them too much credit. Thrawn was brilliant, but he wasn't omniscient. Vader was powerful, but he wasn't unbeatable. Sometimes the simplest explanation was the right one. They'd found a weakness, and they should exploit it before the Empire fixed it. "All right," Carol said, "we go with the plan. But I want sensors watching for energy dampeners, and I want an escape route planned for every scenario where this goes sideways." "Always do," Dodonna said. He looked around the room. "This is it, people. The Death Star arrives in this system in approximately 2 hours. Every ship, every pilot, every resource we have goes into this assault. We either destroy that station or the rebellion ends here." The meeting broke up. Pilots heading to their fighters, ground crews making final preparations. Carol started to leave, but Mon Mothma caught her arm. "You're afraid," the senator said quietly. "I'm being tactical," Carol replied. "You're afraid," Mothma repeated, "that your power won't matter when it counts most. I've seen that fear before, Captain, usually in people who've been carrying the weight of the world alone for too long." Carol didn't have an answer for that, because it was true. She'd failed before, failed to save Marvell, failed to stop Ronan before he reached Xandar, failed to prevent Thanos from getting the stones, and every failure had taught her the same lesson. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What if they're wrong?" Carol asked. "What if Luke can't make that shot? What if I'm not fast enough to protect him? What if Thrawn's trap works and we all die here?" "Then we die fighting, together, and that's still worth more than surviving alone." She squeezed Carol's arm. "You don't have to be invincible, Captain Marvel. You just have to be here, with us. That's all anyone's asking." Carol watched through the hangar opening as the twin suns of Yavin set on the horizon, painting the jungle in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere beyond that horizon, beyond this planet's atmosphere, the Death Star was coming. And with it, Darth Vader, Grand Admiral Thrawn, Grand Moff Tarkin, an entire battle station designed to obliterate planets now focused on destroying the one base where hope still lived. Carol Danvers had faced impossible odds before, but she'd always faced them with the certainty that her power would be enough, that Captain Marvel could overcome any obstacle through sheer force and determination. Here, in a galaxy far from home, she was learning a harder truth. Sometimes power wasn't enough. Sometimes you needed something fragile and infinitely more valuable. You needed faith in your allies, in the people fighting beside you, in farm boys who believed in mystical energy, and smugglers who pretended not to care, and princesses who'd lost everything but refused to surrender. "All right," Carol said finally. "Let's go kill a Death Star." She powered up, just enough to lift off the ground, golden energy crackling around her, and headed for the sky. Behind her, X-Wings and Y-Wings fired their engines. Pilots climbed into cockpits. A rebellion that shouldn't exist, prepared to fight a battle it couldn't win. And somewhere in the Force, something shifted. Possibility crystallizing into destiny. Chaos resolving into purpose. The Battle of Yavin was about to begin. And Captain Marvel was about to learn that sometimes the greatest power was knowing when to let someone else be the hero.
The Millennium Falcon smelled like machine oil, burnt wiring, and something Carol suspected was either Wookiee fur or a biological hazard that hadn't been cleaned in a decade. She'd accepted Han Solo's invitation to see a real ship, mostly to escape the pre-battle tension in the hangar, and partly because she was curious about the smuggler who'd helped rescue Princess Leia from the Death Star with nothing but attitude and a modified freighter. "She may not look like much," Han said, patting the bulkhead with genuine affection, "but she's got it where it counts, made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. "That's a unit of distance, not time," Carol said automatically. Han's expression suggested he'd heard that before and didn't appreciate the reminder. Yeah, well, the lady's got credentials, unlike some people who show up out of nowhere claiming to be from another dimension.
You don't believe me? Carol asked.
I don't believe in a lot of things, sweetheart. Magic forces, ancient hokey religions, glowing ladies who punch through Death Stars. It's all the same to me. You do your thing, I'll do mine, and we'll see who's still standing when the smoke clears. Chewbacca growled something that sounded like disagreement. What? I'm being diplomatic, Han protested. Carol found herself smiling despite the tension. Han Solo reminded her of Tony Stark, all bravado covering deep-seated trust issues, wrapped in enough confidence to convince people they were seeing the real thing. She'd learn to work with Tony eventually. Maybe she could work with Han. Are you flying in the assault? Nah, got my reward, cleared my debt with Jabba. I'm out. Han wouldn't meet her eyes. Rebellion's noble and all, but suicide missions aren't my style. I'm a survivor, not a martyr. Right, Carol said. She'd seen this too. People who convinced themselves they weren't heroes because admitting otherwise meant accepting responsibility. Well, good luck with that. She turned to leave, but Han called after her. Hey, that kid, Luke, he's really going up there, isn't he? Probably. He's gonna get himself killed. He barely flies an X-Wing, barely knows which end of a blaster to point, but he's got this, I don't know, this stupid belief that everything's gonna work out because destiny or the Force or whatever. Han finally looked at her. You really think he can make that shot? Carol thought about her cosmic awareness, about the way probability matrices had crystallized around Luke Skywalker like a gravity around a star. Yeah, I do. Then you're as crazy as he is. But Han's voice lacked conviction. Carol left the Falcon and found Luke in the hangar, sitting on the wing of his assigned X-Wing, staring at the lightsaber clipped to his belt. Up close, the Force presence around him was almost overwhelming, raw, untrained potential that didn't know its own strength. That was Obi-Wan's, Carol said, gesturing to the weapon. Luke looked up, startled. You knew him? No, but I've fought people who use those. They're effective. Carol pulled herself up onto the wing beside him. The metal was warm from the jungle humidity. You know how to use it? Master Kenobi taught me the basics, but not much. We didn't have time. Luke's fingers traced the lightsaber's hilt. He told me to trust the Force, to let go and feel it guiding me. But I don't know if I can. I'm just a farm kid from Tatooine. What if I'm not strong enough? Carol had heard similar doubts from Peter Parker, from Kamala Khan, from every young hero who'd suddenly found themselves holding more power than they knew what to do with. Strength isn't about power, it's about what you do with it when everything's falling apart. Is that what you do? Just keep going when everything's impossible? Usually by punching the impossible until it becomes possible, Carol admitted. But that's my thing. You've got something different. Something this galaxy understands better than it understands me. Luke looked at her curiously. Leia said you can sense the Force but can't use it. How does that work? Imagine standing outside a building, hearing music but never getting invited to the dance. That's me with the Force. I can feel it's there, feel how it moves and connects things, but I can't touch it, can't be part of it. I'm like... She searched for the right words. Like a void. An absence where the Force should be. That sounds lonely, Luke said quietly. It was. Carol hadn't admitted it to anyone, but it was. In this galaxy where mystical energy connected every living thing, she was fundamentally disconnected, an outsider not just by dimension, but by nature. Yeah, it is. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ground crews load proton torpedoes into the X-Wings. Then Luke asked, "Why are you helping us? If you're not from this galaxy, if this isn't your fight, why stay?" Carol thought about Alderaan, about 400 rebels she'd saved at Atollon, about Mon Mothma's speech about belief and Leia's determination to keep fighting despite losing everything. Because I've seen what happens when good people don't stand up to tyranny. I've fought empires before, and I've learned that power without purpose is just destruction. Here, now, my purpose is to make sure that the Death Star doesn't destroy another planet. That's enough. Even if it means trusting people you barely know? Luke asked. Especially then. Carol stood, preparing to jump down. Luke, that shot you're going to take down the exhaust port, trust the Force, as Kenobi said, but also trust yourself. Trust that you're good enough, brave enough, and crazy enough to make the impossible happen. Because from what I've seen, crazy is the only thing that works in this galaxy. Luke smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reminded Carol why she fought for people. May the Force be with you, Captain Marvel. And also with you, kid.
Red Squadron and Gold Squadron assembled on the flight line as the jungle around them darkened. 30 pilots in orange and yellow flight suits, checking systems, reviewing attack vectors, saying goodbyes they hoped weren't final. Carol recognized the ritual. She'd done it herself 100 times before missions where survival was optional and success was mandatory. She found Wedge Antilles, Red 2, going through his pre-flight checklist with methodical precision. "You've done this before," Carol observed. "Fought the Empire? Yeah. Attacked a moon-sized battle station? This is a first." Wedge looked up at her. "You'll be flying cover for us?" "That's the plan. Keep ties off your backs while you focus on the trench run." "Good, because I saw what you did at Scarif. We can use someone who doesn't die easily." Wedge held out his hand. "Wedge Antilles. I'd say it's a pleasure, but we'll see if we both survive the next few hours first." Carol shook it. "Carol Danvers, and we're going to survive because failure isn't an option." "See, that's the difference between you and us," Wedge said, grinning. "Failure's always an option. We just choose not to take it." The pilots began boarding their fighters. Carol watched Luke climb into Red 5, saw him pause to look at the sky one last time before sealing his canopy, saw Biggs Darklighter, Luke's childhood friend according to intelligence reports, give him a thumbs up from Red 3, saw 30 young pilots who'd chosen to fight because someone had to. "Captain Marvel," General Dodona's voice crackled over the command channel. "Death Star has entered the system. ETA to firing range 22 minutes. All squadrons begin launch sequence." This was it. No more planning, no more preparation. Just execution. Carol powered up to binary form, golden energy exploding across her body in waves of photon radiation. She rose into the air as X-Wings and Y-Wings fired their repulsor lift engines, the jungle filling with the scream of fighters launching into certain death. "All wings report in," Red Leader's voice came through. "Red 2 standing by. Red 3 standing by. Red 5 standing by." Luke's voice, steady despite what Carol knew had to be terror. The rebellion's entire fighter complement, barely 40 ships, rose above Yavin 4's canopy and climbed toward space. Carol flew beside them, faster, more maneuverable, but somehow feeling less capable. These pilots had trained together, fought together. They knew each other's moves, trusted each other's skills. Carol was still learning how to be part of a team that wasn't the Avengers. They broke atmosphere, and Carol's cosmic awareness immediately pinged danger. The Death Star hung in space like a mechanical moon, its surface dotted with thousands of lights that marked weapons batteries and docking bays. It was massive, larger than anything Carol had seen outside of Kree capital ships, and it radiated menace through sheer scale. "Look at the size of that thing," Wedge breathed over the comm. "Cut the chatter, Red 2. Accelerate to attack speed." The fighters spread out, adjusting their approach vectors. Carol scanned the Death Star's surface with her enhanced vision, looking for the trench that would lead to the exhaust port. There, a canyon carved into the station's superstructure, running for dozens of kilometers before terminating at a small port that looked insignificant from this distance. 2 meters, wide, at combat speed, under fire. Impossible. "Captain Marvel?" Mon Mothma's voice came through on Carol's private channel. "Sensors are detecting energy signatures near the trench entrance. Analysis suggests they match the dampening technology Thrawn used at Scarif." Carol's jaw tightened. "Called it. How strong?" "Unknown, but concentrated enough to suggest they're specifically targeting you." "So the moment I enter that trench, I'm fighting at reduced capacity." "Great. Any other good news?" "TIE fighters launching from the Death Star, 48 interceptors, combat formation. And Captain," Mothma paused, "we're detecting a unique fighter signature, TIE Advanced X1. That's Vader.
Of course it is. Through the void, she could already feel him, that dark presence that bent reality around itself, that made the Force itself seem to recoil. Darth Vader was coming to finish what they'd started at Atollon. "All craft prepared to engage," Red Leader ordered. "Remember, the exhaust port is your primary target. Everything else is secondary." The TIE fighters screamed towards them, 48 against 40, but TIEs were faster, more maneuverable, and their pilots had been training for years. The rebels had courage and desperation. Carol really hoped that would be enough. "They're coming in too fast," a pilot shouted. The space between the Death Star and the rebel fleet erupted into chaos. Green laser fire from TIEs, red from X-Wings, fighters tumbling in a vacuum, some venting atmosphere, others exploding in brilliant flashes. Carol dove into the furball, moving faster than any conventional craft, destroying 3 TIEs in 3 seconds. But for every TIE she destroyed, more kept coming, and the fighters were just the opening act. The Death Star's surface turbo lasers opened fire.
Carol had thought she understood scale. She'd fought in space battles before, but this was different. Hundreds, maybe thousands of massive energy weapons firing simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive force to sterilize a planet's surface. An X-Wing caught in a direct hit simply ceased to exist. A Y-Wing took a glancing blow and tumbled away, systems dead. "Gold Leader to all craft," came a veteran voice. "We're starting our attack run on the exhaust port. Red Squadron, cover us." "Copy that, Gold Leader," Red Leader responded. "Red Squadron, form up." Carol watched as Gold Squadron, 12 Y-Wing bombers, slower but tougher than X-Wings, dove toward the Death Star's surface. They skimmed across the superstructure, dodging turbo laser fire through skill and luck, heading for the trench entrance. That's when Vader arrived. His TIE Advanced came out of the Death Star's shadow like death itself, black against black, moving with precision that human reflexes shouldn't allow. He was flanked by 2 wingmen, and together they tore through Gold Squadron's formation like a blade through silk. Gold 2 exploded. Gold 4 took a hit and tumbled away, trailing fire. Gold Leader's shields held, but Vader was already lining up another shot. "I'm hit!" someone screamed. "Gold 5, pull up!" Carol accelerated, pushing her binary form to maximum and intercepted Vader before he could destroy Gold Leader. She positioned herself between the Sith Lord and his target, absorbing laser fire that should have killed her, but instead just hurt. "Captain Marvel," Vader's mechanical voice came through on an open channel. "We meet again. Have you learned humility since our last encounter? Have you learned that arrogance makes you predictable?" Carol shot back, unleashing a photon blast that Vader dodged with contemptuous ease. They circled each other in the void, a starfighter against a woman who needed no ship. Vader's TIE was faster in straight lines, but Carol could change direction on a thought. He had weapons and shields, but she was a weapon. They were perfectly matched in ways that made this fight deadly. "You fight well," Vader said, "but you fight alone. Your rebel allies are dying while you focus on me. Poor tactical judgment." Carol glanced toward the Death Star. Gold Squadron was in the trench now, but TIEs were swarming them. She could hear the panicked comm chatter as pilots died one by one. Gold Leader was making his approach on the exhaust port, but Vader's wingmen were right behind him. Carol had a choice: keep fighting Vader or break off to protect Gold Squadron. "Red 5, this is Red Leader," Luke's voice came through. "We're starting our attack run on the exhaust port." The Force presence around Luke flared like a beacon. Carol felt it even through her cosmic awareness, potential crystallizing into action, destiny manifesting in real time. She made her decision. Carol broke off from Vader and dove toward the trench, accelerating past the speed of sound and atmosphere, in vacuum, far faster. She reached Gold Leader just as his torpedo launch failed, just as Vader's wingmen destroyed his ship. Gold Squadron was gone, all 12 bombers, dead or disabled. "Red Leader, this is Red 5, Luke said, his voice carrying the weight of realization. "We're the only ones left." "Then we'll have to do it ourselves," Red Leader responded. "Red Squadron, follow my lead."
10 X-Wings dove toward the trench entrance. Carol followed, preparing to provide cover fire against the TIE swarm that was already repositioning. And the moment she entered the trench, reality twisted. The energy dampeners are activated. Carol felt her binary form flicker, felt her quantum energy matrix disrupted by technology specifically calibrated for her quantum signature. Her power output dropped, not to 0, but far enough to matter. 50%, maybe 40%. She could still fight, but couldn't dominate, couldn't overwhelm, couldn't be the invincible force she'd been relying on. "Welcome to my trap, Captain Marvel." Thrawn's cultured voice came through Imperial channels. "I do hope you enjoy the accommodations. We prepared them specifically for you." Above the trench, Vader circled like a predator sensing wounded prey. "Red Squadron is yours, Admiral. Captain Marvel is mine." Carol tried to power up, to push through the dampeners through sheer will, but Thrawn had studied her too well. Every frequency she tried to access, the dampeners countered. Every burst of photon energy neutralized. She was trapped, reduced, and Red Squadron was flying into a killing field with nothing but her compromised protection and their own desperate skill. "Luke," Carol transmitted on a private channel, "that force thing Kenobi taught you? Start using it, because I don't think I'm going to be enough." "I'll try," Luke said, and Carol could hear the fear beneath the determination. The trench run had begun, and Captain Marvel, for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, was facing a battle she might not be able to win through power alone. The Death Star Trench was a canyon of metal and menace, its walls rising hundreds of meters on either side, dotted with gun emplacements that tracked the rebel fighters with mechanical precision. Carol flew above the trench, trying to maintain altitude while her dampened powers flickered like a dying engine. Below her, Red Squadron screamed along the trench floor at near-suicidal speeds, laser fire from surface cannons creating a web of death they had to navigate through. "Heavy fire, boss," Wedge called out. 23 degrees. "I see it," Red Leader responded. "Stay on target." Carol destroyed a gun emplacement with a focused photon blast that cost her twice the energy it should have. The dampeners were insidious. They didn't shut her down completely, just made everything harder, like fighting with weights strapped to every limb, running uphill through mud. Her cosmic awareness was screaming warnings, TIE fighters approaching from behind, Vader's presence growing closer, and something else, something her quantum connection couldn't quite identify, but recognized as wrong. "Red 2, Red 3, pull in," Red Leader ordered. The X-Wings tightened formation, their S-foils locked in attack position. Carol could see the exhaust port now, still kilometers away but visible, a tiny opening that represented their only hope. Red Leader was lining up his shot, computer systems calculating trajectories, while R2 units compensated for wind resistance and targeting drift. Then the TIEs hit them. 3 fighters moving in perfect formation, Vader's advance leading. They came in low, using the trench walls for cover, and opened fire with devastating precision. Red 10 exploded, Red 12's shields collapsed, and the fighter cartwheeled into the trench wall. "We've picked up a new group of signals," someone reported from the Rebel command ship. "Enemy fighters coming your way." Carol dove, trying to intercept Vader, but her reduced speed made it like swimming through concrete. She managed to destroy one of Vader's wingmen, a perfectly placed blast that vaporized the TIE's cockpit, but Vader himself was untouchable. He flew with force-enhanced reflexes, predicting movements before they happened, his targeting computer guided by prescient awareness. "I can't shake him," Red Leader shouted. Carol pushed harder, channeling every joule of available energy into acceleration. She had to get between Vader and Red Leader. Had to. Vader fired. Red Leader's X-Wing erupted in flames, tumbling away from the formation. The voice on the comm cut off mid-scream. "Red Leader is gone," someone said numbly. "We're still operational, Red 2, another pilot responded. "Biggs, Wedge, let's close it up. We're going in." But Carol knew, felt it through her cosmic awareness, that Biggs and Wedge wouldn't make it. Not because they weren't skilled, but because this battle had already chosen its hero. The Force was crystallizing around Luke Skywalker like gravity collapsing into a singularity, pulling probability and destiny into alignment. "Luke," Carol transmitted on their private channel. "This is your shot." "I'm not ready," Luke said, and she heard raw panic beneath the words. "Red Leader was supposed to... I'm just..." "You're exactly what you need to be," Carol interrupted. She destroyed another gun emplacement, her power levels dropping toward 30%. The dampeners were winning. "Trust the Force. Trust yourself. I'll buy you the time." Vader was lining up another shot, this time on Biggs. Carol intercepted, taking laser fire across her shoulder that burned even through her photon shielding. Pain exploded through her nervous system. The dampeners made her more vulnerable, more human than she'd been since arriving in this galaxy. She retaliated with a blast that caught Vader's remaining wingman, sending the TIE spiraling into the trench wall. But Vader himself was untouchable, dancing through her attacks like he knew where they'd be before she fired them. Because he did. The Force showed him the future, let him react to possibilities before they became certainties. "Biggs!" Wedge shouted. Red 3 exploded in a brilliant flash. Biggs Darklighter, Luke's childhood friend, died protecting his formation leader. Carol felt Luke's anguish through the Force, a spike of grief and rage that made the mystical energy around him pulse like a heartbeat. "Luke, pull out," Luke said, his voice suddenly calm, eerily calm. "You're not doing any good back there." "Sorry, boss," Wedge responded, and his X-Wing broke formation, climbing out of the trench. That left Luke alone. Red 5, flying toward the exhaust port with Darth Vader on their tail and Carol running on fumes above them. "Captain Marvel," Thrawn's voice came through, still cultured but with an edge of satisfaction. "Your power signature has dropped to 28%. Impressive that you're still functional, but hardly sufficient to protect young Skywalker. Perhaps it's time to surrender." "Not really my style," Carol gasped. Every movement hurts now. The dampeners had found the resonance frequency of her photon energy matrix and were systematically disrupting it. She was maintaining binary form through sheer stubborn will, but physics was patient, and she was running out of time. Vader fired again. The shots missed Luke by centimeters. Carol could see them passing through the space where he'd been a microsecond earlier. Luke was flying on instinct, making corrections before his conscious mind registered the danger. The Force. He was using the Force, letting it guide his movements. "Use the Force, Luke," a voice said over the comm. Carol's cosmic awareness recognized it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, but not alive, not dead either. Something else. A presence in the Force, consciousness preserved beyond death. Force ghosts. Of course, this galaxy had Force ghosts. "I've lost R2, Luke shouted, as laser fire destroyed his astromech droid. The computer targeting system went dark. Carol saw Luke's hand move toward the targeting computer controls, then pause. Saw him make a decision. "Trust your feelings, Luke," Kenobi's ghost whispered. Luke switched off his targeting computer. "Luke, you switched off your targeting computer," the Rebel command ship said, confused. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Luke said. "I'm all right." Carol felt it then, the Force flowing through Luke like a river finding its course. His movements became fluid, natural. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was feeling, letting the mystical energy guide him toward a future that was simultaneously certain and impossible. Vader felt it too. "The Force is strong with this one," he said, his mechanical voice carrying surprise. The exhaust port was approaching. 5 kilometers. 4. 3. Carol made her decision. She had maybe one good burst left, one concentrated blast at full power before the dampener shut her down completely. She could use it on Vader, destroy him, eliminate the threat, save Luke directly. Or she could trust. Trust that Luke could make the shot. Trust that the Force would guide him. Trust that sometimes the hero wasn't the one with cosmic power from another dimension. 2 kilometers. Vader was lining up the kill shot, his targeting computer locked on Red 5. Carol dove between them. She didn't attack Vader, didn't try to destroy him or disable his TIE. She just positioned herself in his line of fire, directly between the Sith Lord and Luke Skywalker, and channeled every remaining joule of photon energy into her shields. Vader fired. The laser impacts hit Carol as hammer blows. 1, 2, 3,
4. Her binary form flickered, threatened to collapse entirely. She felt her ribs crack, felt her systems overload, felt her molecular cohesion starting to fail for the second time in 3 weeks. But she held. For 3 critical seconds, she held. "What?" Vader said, genuinely confused. Luke fired his proton torpedoes. Carol saw them launch, 2 small projectiles that looked impossibly inadequate against a battle station the size of a moon. Saw them arc through space, guided not by targeting computers, but by something far older and far more mysterious. The Force. The torpedoes dropped into the exhaust port perfectly, impossibly, 2 meters wide at combat speed, and Luke had threaded the needle because the Force had shown him how. "Pull up, Luke!" Wedge shouted. "Pull up!" Red 5 banked hard, climbing out of the trench as Carol finally lost her grip on binary form. She powered down to standard enhancement, golden energy fading to barely visible, and started to fall. Vader sensed it, sensed the change coming. "I have you now," he said, lining up another shot on Luke. Then something hit Vader's tie from above. The Millennium Falcon screamed out of hyperspace directly above the Death Star trench, Han Solo at the controls, and opened fire on Vader's fighter. The TIE Advanced spun wildly, damaged, and careened into deep space. "You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home." Carol was falling now, her powers completely exhausted, the dampeners having achieved exactly what Thrawn designed them to do. She was conscious enough to see the Rebel fleet beginning its retreat, to feel the Death Star's reactor going critical beneath them, to know that she wasn't going to make it out in time. "Carol!" Luke's voice cut through the comm static. "Hang on!" Red 5 came up beneath her, S-foils deployed to maximum. Carol managed to grab onto the wing, her enhanced strength just barely sufficient to hold on as Luke accelerated away from the dying battle station, with Captain Marvel clinging to his fighter like a golden barnacle. Behind them, the Death Star exploded. It wasn't like movie explosions Carol had seen. There was no sound in the vacuum, no dramatic music swell, just a brilliant flash of light that expanded into a debris field kilometers across. The massive battle station, the weapon that had destroyed Alderaan, the symbol of Imperial dominance, simply ceased to exist. Vader's damaged TIE tumbled through the expanding debris field, the Sith Lord inside already plotting his revenge. Thrawn, watching from a distant Star Destroyer, made note of every variable that had defeated his perfect trap, and Grand Moff Tarkin, who'd been too arrogant to evacuate, died with his station. But the rebellion survived. The Death Star was destroyed, and against all odds, hope lived another day.
Carol woke in the Rebel medical bay 12 hours later, her body covered in regenerative bandages and monitoring equipment. Kanan Jarrus sat beside her bed, eyes closed, hands hovering over her chest. "Force healing?" Carol asked, her voice raspy. Kanan opened his eyes. "Something like that. You nearly scattered yourself into your component atoms again. Twice in 3 weeks is a record we'd prefer not to repeat." "Did we win?" Carol asked, though she already knew the answer. "We won. Death Star is space dust. Tarkin's dead. The Empire's reeling." Kanan leaned back. "Luke made the shot. 2 meters wide at combat speed. No targeting computer. Just the Force. It was..." He shook his head. "I've never seen anything like it." "How is he?" "Celebrated as a hero. Medals, recognition, the whole thing. He's been asking about you every hour." Kanan studied her. "You saved his life. Took Vader's fire so Luke could make the shot. Why?" Carol thought about it. About her instinct to solve everything with power. To be the one who saved the day because that's what Captain Marvel did. About learning, slowly, painfully, that sometimes the greatest act of heroism was letting someone else be the hero. "Because it wasn't my shot to take," Carol said simply. Kanan smiled. "The Force works in mysterious ways, but I think it brought you to this galaxy for a reason. Maybe this was it. Maybe Luke needed someone powerful enough to protect him, but wise enough to let him fulfill his destiny. Or maybe I just got lucky," Carol said. "Maybe, but I've learned not to bet against the Force." Kanan stood. Rest. Heal. The rebellion's planning a medal ceremony tomorrow. Mon Mothma wants you there. After he left, Carol lay in the medical bay and stared at the ceiling. Her powers were slowly regenerating. She could feel her photon energy matrix repairing itself, adapting to this galaxy's strange energy patterns. In a few days, she'd be back to 90% capacity, maybe higher. But something had changed, not in her powers, but in her understanding of them. She'd come to this galaxy believing that strength meant being invincible, that being Captain Marvel meant never needing help, never showing weakness, never trusting others to handle what she could handle better. The Death Star had taught her differently, had shown her that sometimes strength meant taking a hit so someone else could land the blow, that sometimes heroism meant being the shield instead of the sword. Through the medical bay window, she could see Yavin 4's jungle lit by celebration fires. The rebellion was rejoicing, and they'd earned it. They'd won an impossible victory against overwhelming odds. And Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, cosmically powered Avenger from another dimension, had been part of it. Not as the solution, not as the weapon, as an ally, as a friend, as someone who'd learned that even the mightiest warrior sometimes needed to step back and let the Force work through someone else. She closed her eyes and let herself heal, wondering what the Empire would do next, knowing that Vader and Thrawn were already planning their countermoves. But for now, just for now, they'd won. The medal ceremony took place in the Great Temple on Yavin 4, the ancient Massassi structure transformed into a throne room of hope. Hundreds of rebels lined the hall, pilots, soldiers, technicians, refugees who'd found purpose in resistance. They stood at attention as Princess Leia, in white ceremonial robes, prepared to honor the heroes of the Battle of Yavin. Carol stood at the back, uncomfortable in the formal rebel uniform Mon Mothma had insisted she wear. She'd argued that she wasn't part of the ceremony, that Luke and Han were the real heroes, but Mothma had been immovable. "You took fire from Darth Vader so Luke could make his shot," the senator had said firmly. "That makes you a hero whether you accept it or not." So Carol watched as Luke Skywalker and Han Solo walked down the aisle, Luke still looking like an overwhelmed farm boy, Han trying to appear nonchalant and failing, toward the princess who'd become their friend. Chewbacca walked beside Han, and behind them came Wedge Antilles and the handful of pilots who'd survived. And at the very back, moving slowly because her ribs were still healing, came Carol. The ceremony was simple. Leia placed medals around Luke's neck, then Han's, then turned to Carol. Up close, the princess's eyes held gratitude and something else, recognition, the look of one warrior acknowledging another. "For extraordinary valor in the face of overwhelming odds," Leia said, her voice carrying through the temple. "For sacrifice that enabled victory, for proving that hope is stronger than fear." She placed the medal around Carol's neck. "The Rebel Alliance honors Captain Marvel." The temple erupted in applause. Carol felt her face flush. She'd received medals before, from the Air Force, from S.H.I.E.L.D., from grateful planets she'd saved. But this was different. These people had seen her fail, seen her struggle, seen her reduced to 28% power and still fighting. They weren't celebrating invincibility. They were celebrating someone who'd bled alongside them. After the ceremony, as rebels celebrated with whatever alcohol the Outer Rim could provide, Carol found Luke on one of the temple's exterior platforms, staring up at the stars. "Couldn't handle the party?" she asked. Luke smiled. "Just needed air. It's a lot. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I'm the hero who destroyed the Death Star." That's how legends work. One day you're trying to figure out who you are. The next, everyone's telling you who they think you are. Is that what happened to you in your dimension? Carol leaned against the stone railing. Sort of. I got my powers by accident, absorbed energy from an explosion that should have killed me. Spent years trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with them. Took a while to realize I got to choose. That power didn't come with a destiny, it came with responsibility.
But you chose to be a hero. I chose to help people. The hero part is what other people called it. Carol looked at him. You did well up there, kid. That shot was impossible, but you made it anyway. I almost didn't, admitted Luke. When Red Leader died, when Biggs, I wanted to run, to pull out as Wedge did. But then I heard Master Kenobi's voice telling me to use the Force, and I just let go, stopped thinking, trusted something bigger than myself. That's harder than it sounds, Carol said. You did the same thing. You could have destroyed Vader, but you didn't. You protected me instead. Let me be the one to make the shot. You sound like Kanan. Maybe we're both right, Luke smiled. I felt you during the battle. Not through the Force. You're still this weird void where the Force should be. But I felt your presence, your determination. Knowing you were there, fighting for us, it helped. Made me believe I could do it. Before Carol could respond, Han Solo's voice cut through the night. There you are, hiding from your own party? That's just sad. Han emerged onto the platform with Leia beside him, both carrying drinks. Chewbacca followed, growling something that might have been a greeting or a complaint. Carol still couldn't tell the difference. We're not hiding, Luke protested. We're reflecting. Reflecting is what you do after you've had too much to drink and can't find your bunk, Han said. Come on, heroes. The rebellion wants to celebrate the people who actually won them a battle for once. For once? Leia raised an eyebrow. We've won battles before. Yeah, but usually they involve tactical retreats and acceptable losses. This time we actually blew something up and didn't lose half our fleet doing it. Han raised his glass. To impossible victories and the crazy people who make them happen. They drank to that. Even Carol, who accepted a glass of something blue that tasted like fuel and burned going down. So what now? Wedge asked, appearing with a cluster of pilots. The Empire's going to retaliate. They always do. Yavin's compromised. They know we're here. We'll evacuate, Leia said. Find a new base. Keep moving. That's how we survive. Running from one hideout to another. Sounds like a great life. It's the life that keeps us alive, Mon Mothma said, joining the group. The senator looked exhausted but satisfied. The Death Star's destruction is a significant victory, but it's not the end of the war. The Empire still controls most of the galaxy. They still have Vader, Thrawn, and the Emperor himself.
About that, Carol said. Thrawn's trap almost worked. Those dampeners reduced my power to less than 30%. If he'd had another 20 minutes, I'd have been completely neutralized. He'll adjust his tactics based on what he learned, Mothma agreed. Which is why we need to adjust ours. Captain Marvel, you've proven yourself a valuable ally, but we can't rely on you to win every battle. Good, Carol said, because I'm still looking for a way home. This isn't my galaxy. This isn't my war. But you're fighting it anyway, Luke said quietly. For now, because the Empire made it personal. Carol looked around at the assembled rebels. But Luke's right. You can't depend on me. I might find a way home tomorrow, or Thrawn might figure out how to permanently neutralize my powers. You need to be able to win without me. Inspiring speech, Han said dryly. Really motivational. It's realistic, Carol countered. I've been on teams before where one person was the linchpin. When that person went down, the whole operation collapsed. You're better than that. You proved it at Yavin. Luke made the shot, Han saved him, Wedge provided cover. You worked together. She's right, Leia said. We can't build our strategy around a single asset, no matter how powerful. We need redundancy, alternative plans, the ability to adapt. Speaking of adapting, Kanan said, materializing from the shadows like Jedi apparently did, I've been thinking about your force sensitivity issue, Carol. I'm not force sensitive, I'm force absent. There's a difference. Exactly, and that difference might be an advantage. Kanan gestured for her to follow him away from the group. Curious, Carol complied. They walked to a quieter section of the temple, where ancient stone carvings depicted Massassi warriors battling unknown enemies. Kanan studied them for a moment before speaking. The Sith used the Force to predict their enemies' movements, to manipulate reality, to dominate through mystical power, he said. But you're invisible to that. When Vader tries to predict your movements through the Force, what does he see? Nothing. a void, which makes you unpredictable, unreadable. Kanan turned to her. I've been consulting with Ahsoka. She's a former Jedi, one of the most powerful Force users alive. She agrees that your unique status could be weaponized, not by making you Force-sensitive, but by training you to fight against Force users specifically. Carol felt her tactical mind engage, countering precognition by being unpredictable, exploiting the fact that their primary advantage doesn't work on me. Exactly. Vader almost killed you at Yavin because he can predict normal opponents, but if you learn to fight in ways that don't need prediction, that rely on pure reaction and adaptation, Kanan smiled, you could become the one thing in this galaxy that truly frightens them, the weapon they can't sense coming. It made sense. Carol had been fighting Force users the same way she fought everyone else, with overwhelming power and tactical precision, but Force users weren't everyone else. They needed a different approach. When do we start? Carol asked. Tomorrow, after you've healed. Ahsoka's agreed to help. She's fought Sith before, knows their weaknesses. Kanan paused. But Carol, this training isn't just about fighting. It's about understanding the Force well enough to move around it, to become comfortable with being the void. I'm already pretty comfortable with being an outsider, Carol said. I know, but there's a difference between being an outsider and being at peace with it. Kanan's expression softened. You're not from this galaxy. You may never fully belong here, but that doesn't mean you can't find purpose while you're here. Doesn't mean you can't make a difference. Before Carol could respond, alarms blared across the base. Red lights strobed. Mon Mothma's voice cut through the celebration. All personnel to evacuation stations. The Imperial fleet detected entering the system. ETA 15 minutes. This is not a drill. The celebration died instantly. Rebels sprinted to positions, pilots to fighters, ground crews to transports. Carol's tactical assessment was immediate and grim. The base couldn't be defended, not against a full Imperial fleet, not with their forces depleted from the Death Star assault. How many ships? Leia demanded, running toward the command center with everyone else. 2 Star Destroyers, the sensor officer reported. One of them is the Chimera. Thrawn, of course, the Empire's most brilliant tactician, arrived personally to punish the base that had destroyed their ultimate weapon. Captain Marvel, Mon Mothma said, her voice carrying absolute authority. We need time. 30 minutes for full evacuation. Can you buy us that? Carol felt her powers, barely recovered, maybe 60% capacity after yesterday's battle. 60% against 2 Star Destroyers and whatever surprises Thrawn had prepared. The dampener technology had proven effective. He'd have more of it, better versions. This was suicide. Smart tactics would be to evacuate with the rebellion, live to fight another day, not throw herself against impossible odds for people she'd known for a month. But Carol looked around at the rebels scrambling to evacuate, the pilots who'd fought beside her, the refugees who'd found hope here, Luke and Leia and Han and all the people who'd somehow become important to her in ways she hadn't expected. Yeah, Carol said, I can buy you 30 minutes. She powered up to binary form, golden energy crackling across her skin, though weaker than usual, more unstable. Her body protested, her partially healed ribs screaming, but she pushed through it. She'd operated at worse odds before. She'd survived worse injuries. Carol, Luke said, you're not recovered. You can't. Watch me, Carol interrupted. She rose into the air, accelerating toward space. Get everyone out. I'll see you on the other side. She didn't wait for arguments, didn't give anyone time to point out the obvious, that this was probably suicide, that Thrawn had beaten her before, that even Captain Marvel had limits. Because that was exactly why she had to go. To prove to the Empire, to the rebellion, to herself, that limits were suggestions, not rules. That impossible was negotiable. That sometimes you fought unwinnable battles because someone had to, and you happened to be the person who could survive it longest. Carol broke through Yavin 4's atmosphere and immediately saw them. The Chimera and its sister destroyer hanging in orbit like gray monuments to Imperial power. TIE fighters were already deploying, not dozens this time, but hundreds. And on the Chimera's bridge, Carol knew Grand Admiral Thrawn was watching, analyzing, preparing to spring whatever trap he'd designed specifically for this moment. "Captain Marvel," Thrawn's voice came through on an open channel, predictable as always. "Did you truly believe we wouldn't retaliate for the Death Star's destruction, that we wouldn't trace the rebel base to this system? I believe you're about to learn that some things don't go according to plan, even yours. Perhaps, shall we test that theory?" The TIE fighters swarmed, and Captain Marvel, cosmically powered Avenger operating at 60% capacity with partially healed ribs and a death wish disguised as tactical necessity, dove into the swarm to buy the rebellion 30 minutes they desperately needed. It was going to be a long 30 minutes. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. 200 TIE fighters, 2 Star Destroyers with full weapons complements, and Grand Admiral Thrawn's tactical genius versus 1 cosmically powered woman operating at 60% capacity. Carol had faced worse odds, technically, but never while already injured, never while her enemy had spent weeks analyzing her every weakness. She destroyed the first wave of TIEs with precision strikes, photon blasts that vaporized cockpits while avoiding the fuel cells that would create expanding debris fields. 12 fighters down in 8 seconds, then 20, then 30, but they kept coming. "Impressive, Captain." Thrawn's voice remained infuriatingly calm, "but I calculate you can maintain that level of energy expenditure for approximately 7 minutes before exhaustion. The evacuation requires 30. Simple mathematics suggests you will fail." Carol dodged a concentrated barrage from a TIE squadron, banking hard enough that her ribs screamed protest. "You know what I've learned about mathematics, Thrawn? Sometimes the impossible variables change the equation." She dove toward the Chimera, drawing fire away from Yavin 4. The Star Destroyer's turbo lasers tracked her, and Carol felt the familiar dance begin. Dodge, weave, absorb what she couldn't avoid, counter when openings appeared. She'd done this at Scarif, at Atollon, but then she'd been at 90% capacity and furious. Now she was at 60% and tired. "All transports, report status," Mon Mothma's voice crackled over the rebel channel in Carol's ear. "Transport Delta still loading wounded, need 10 more minutes. Transport Echo has engine trouble, repairs in progress. Transports Alpha and Beta away clean." 28 minutes to go. A TIE interceptor came at her from above, faster than the standard fighters, more maneuverable. Carol destroyed it, but the effort cost her. Each blast was draining her reserves faster than they could regenerate. The photon energy matrix that powered her abilities was still recovering from yesterday's near disintegration. She was running on fumes and determination. "You cannot win this battle," Thrawn observed. "Even if you destroy every fighter, you cannot evacuate the base while 2 Star Destroyers maintain orbital control. The logical choice is retreat. Preserve yourself for battles you can actually win." "Logic's overrated," Carol gasped, destroying 3 more TIEs. But Thrawn was right, and they both knew it. Carol could fight for maybe 15 minutes before her powers failed completely. That would leave 15 minutes where the rebellion had no defense, where Thrawn could rain orbital bombardment on the base and slaughter everyone still evacuating, unless Carol changed the equation. She stopped fighting defensively, stopped trying to preserve her energy. Instead, she channeled everything, every remaining joule of photon energy, every ounce of cosmic power her damaged matrix could generate into a single, devastating attack. Carol became a golden comet, accelerating to combat speed and ramming directly into the Chimera's bridge tower. The impact would have killed a normal human, would have splattered them across the reinforced durasteel like an insect on a windshield. But Carol was neither normal nor human anymore. She was a quantum-powered warrior who'd absorbed the energy of the Tesseract, who'd gone binary and survived the void between galaxies. She punched through the Chimera's shields and hull, creating a breach that vented atmosphere and sent the bridge crew scrambling for emergency seals. Alarms shrieked, emergency bulkheads slammed shut, and Carol found herself inside the Star Destroyer, face to face with Grand Admiral Thrawn. The Chiss Admiral stood calmly behind a transparasteel emergency barrier that had deployed microseconds before impact, his red eyes studying her with clinical interest. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to restore systems, but Thrawn himself seemed utterly composed. "Fascinating," he said through the intercom. "A direct assault on the command structure. Crude, but effective in creating chaos. However, you've now trapped yourself inside my ship, weakened and surrounded. Have you calculated your exit strategy?" Carol hadn't. She'd acted on instinct and desperation, the kind of tactical decision that made military commanders wince, but somehow worked when you had cosmic powers and a willingness to take insane risks. "Don't need an exit strategy if I blow your reactor," Carol gasped, powering up for another blast. "Please don't," a cultured female voice said behind her. Carol spun to find a woman in an Imperial officer's uniform, flanked by stormtroopers with weapons trained on her. But it wasn't the weapons that made Carol pause. It was the energy signature her cosmic awareness detected. Force-sensitive, strong, but not hostile. Not yet. "I am Admiral Aralani, and I have a proposition that may interest you more than dying in a futile gesture." "Not interested in Imperial negotiations," Carol said. "Not even if it saves both your rebellion and prevents unnecessary casualties on both sides?" Aralani gestured, and a holographic display activated showing Yavin 4 below. "We have a second fleet entering the system in approximately 12 minutes. 3 more Star Destroyers, full fighter complements, and explicit orders from the Emperor himself to show no mercy. Everyone on that moon will die unless you accept our terms." "What terms?" Carol asked, although she was already calculating whether she could punch through to the reactor before the stormtroopers could fire. "Stand down, surrender yourself to Imperial custody. In exchange, we allow the rebellion to complete their evacuation unmolested." Aralani's expression was unreadable. "Grand Admiral Thrawn believes you are more valuable alive than dead. The Emperor disagrees. This offer expires when the Second Fleet arrives." It was a trap. Obviously a trap. Accept surrender and they'd study her, weaponize her powers, turn her into everything she'd fought against. But refuse, and hundreds of rebels died, people who'd fought beside her, who'd trusted her, who'd become something like friends. "How do I know you'll honor the terms?" Carol asked. "You don't," Thrawn's voice came through the intercom. "But consider this. I have spent considerable resources trying to capture you. Why would I jeopardize that investment by destroying the leverage that makes you surrender? The rebellion escapes, I acquire you, and we avoid unnecessary casualties. A logical exchange." Carol's cosmic awareness was screaming warnings, but also calculating probabilities. Thrawn wasn't lying. He did want her alive more than he wanted the rebellion destroyed. The Emperor's orders to show no mercy would override that preference, but if Thrawn could present capturing Captain Marvel as a greater victory than destroying one rebel base. "Let me speak to the rebellion," Carol said. "They get a say in this." Aralani nodded, and suddenly Mon Mothma's holographic form appeared in the command center, transmitted from Yavin 4. "Captain Marvel," Mothma said, her expression grave. "We're monitoring the Imperial fleet's approach. The second wave arrives in 10 minutes. We can have everyone evacuated in 18. The mathematics are unfavorable. They're offering a trade. I surrender, they let you evacuate." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Leia's voice cut through it. "Absolutely not. We don't trade people for our survival. That's not who we are." "Leia's right," Luke added. "We'll fight, together. We'll find another way." But Carol could hear the desperation beneath the determination. There was no other way, not one that didn't end with hundreds of casualties. "You know what the worst part about being Captain Marvel is?" Carol said, and she was surprised to find herself smiling. "Everyone thinks you're invincible, that you can't be hurt, can't be captured, can't be beaten. But the truth is, I'm just a person who happens to have cosmic powers and really bad luck with empires." "Carol," Kanan started. "Let me finish." Carol looked at Thrawn through the transparent steel barrier. "I've been fighting your empire for a month, fought Vader twice, survived your traps, and helped destroy your Death Star. And you know what I've learned? You're not invincible either. You make mistakes. You underestimate people. You think power and strategy can solve everything." "Your point?" Thrawn asked. "My point is that I'm not surrendering." Carol powered up, golden energy crackling despite her exhaustion. She was making a wager. Give the rebellion 30 minutes, full evacuation time. In exchange, I won't destroy your ship, your fleet, or you. I'll just leave. No surrender, no capture, no trade. That's not a wager, that's suicide. You're at 60% capacity, wounded and surrounded. You cannot destroy 2 Star Destroyers before we neutralize you. "Can't I?" Carol smiled wider. "Here's what you're forgetting, Admiral. I'm not from this galaxy. I don't fight according to your rules. And I've learned something important in the past month. Sometimes the greatest power isn't knowing what you can do, it's knowing what you're willing to do." She channeled every remaining photon of energy into her core, building toward critical mass. Not an explosion, a conversion. The same technique she'd used at Scarif, but more focused. She was going to turn herself into pure energy and burn through the Chimera's systems like a virus, crippling it from the inside. It would probably kill her, or at minimum, scatter her atoms across the ship in ways that would take weeks to reform, if she could reform at all. But the rebellion would escape, and Thrawn would learn that some battles couldn't be won through preparation and strategy. "She's bluffing," one of Thrawn's officers said nervously. "No," Thrawn said quietly, studying Carol with what might have been respect. "Admiral Aralani, signal the Second Fleet to hold position. All forces cease fire and allow rebel evacuation." "Sir?" Aralani looked shocked. "Captain Marvel has demonstrated she will sacrifice herself to achieve her objective. If we press the attack, she destroys this ship and likely the second destroyer as well. The Emperor wants her alive. Better to let the rebellion escape than to force her into a martyrdom that costs us 2 capital ships." "The Emperor will be displeased," Aralani said. "The Emperor is always displeased. That's his nature." Thrawn turned to Carol. "You have your 30 minutes, Captain. Use them wisely. But know this, every time you escape, I learn more about you, your patterns, your tactics, your psychology. Eventually, I will construct a trap you cannot escape through sacrifice or determination." "Looking forward to it," Carol said, though her energy reserves were critically low. "Mind if I use your hangar bay to exit? Saves me punching through another hull." Thrawn actually smiled, a small, calculating expression. "Hangar 7, you'll find it undefended. Consider it professional courtesy from one tactician to another." Carol made her way through the corridors of the Chimera, stormtroopers parting before her like water around a stone. It was surreal. Walking through an enemy capital ship unmolested, past Imperial crew who stared but didn't fire, towards a hangar where a Lambda-class shuttle sat with engines already warming. "A gift," Thrawn's voice came through the ship's intercom. "You'll need transportation back to Yavin 4. And Captain, when we meet again, and we will, I hope you're fully recovered. I want to face you at full capacity. Anything less would be unsatisfying." Carol took the shuttle, her hands shaking from exhaustion as she programmed the navigation computer. Through the viewport, she watched TIE fighters holding position, watched the Second Imperial Fleet maintain distance, watched the Rebellion's transports climbing into space unmolested. She'd won. Through bluff and desperation and a willingness to die spectacularly, she'd bought the Rebellion exactly what they needed. But Thrawn was right. He'd learned from this encounter. learned that she'd sacrifice herself for allies, learned that she operated on principles more than logic, learned that the most dangerous thing about Captain Marvel wasn't her power, it was her inability to give up. And that knowledge, in the hands of the Empire's greatest tactician, was terrifying. The Rebel Alliance evacuated Yavin 4 completely. Every pilot, every soldier, every refugee who'd found hope in the Jungle Temple made it to their transports and jumped to hyperspace. 0 casualties, perfect evacuation. All because a woman from another dimension had flown into enemy fire and convinced a Grand Admiral that destroying her wasn't worth the cost. Carol landed the stolen shuttle at the evacuation site 3 hours later, her powers completely exhausted. She collapsed in the hangar bay, and Luke and Leia found her there, unconscious but alive. She bought us time we didn't deserve, traded herself into a trap, and then bluffed her way out through sheer audacity. That's what heroes do. They give everything, and sometimes they're lucky enough to survive the giving. When Carol woke 18 hours later in the medical bay of the Rebel fleet's new temporary base, Mon Mothma was waiting with a data file. "Intel reports," the senator said without preamble. "The Emperor has declared you Priority 1 threat. Vader has been given unlimited resources to either capture or kill you. And Thrawn," she paused, "Thrawn has requested personal command of all operations related to you. The Empire's 3 most dangerous assets, all focused on one target." "Sounds about right," Carol said. Her voice was hoarse, her body wrapped in so many medical sensors she looked like a science experiment. "What's the rebellion's move?" "We adapt, train, prepare for the next battle." Mon Mothma handed her the data file. "This contains everything we know about Ahsoka Tano. She's agreed to help train you in anti-force combat techniques. If you're going to fight Vader again, and you will, you need to understand how to counter abilities your cosmic powers can't match." Carol thought about that. Thought about Vader's precognition, his telekinesis, his ability to manipulate reality through mystical energy she couldn't access. Thought about Thrawn's analytical genius and the Emperor's dark side mastery. "I can't win," Carol said quietly. "Not against all 3, not long term. They'll keep adapting, keep learning, keep building better traps. Eventually, one of them will work." "Probably," Mothma agreed. "But until then, you fight, you survive, you give the rebellion time to grow stronger. That's all any of us can do. Buy time and hope it's enough." Outside the medical bay, through a viewport that showed the stars of a galaxy far from Carol's home, the future waited. The Empire, wounded but far from defeated, was already planning its response. Vader meditated in his chamber, plotting revenge. Thrawn studied recordings of the Yavin evacuation, analyzing every decision Carol had made. And Emperor Palpatine, sensing a disturbance in the Force he didn't fully understand, began to wonder if this dimensional anomaly represented a threat to his carefully constructed empire. Luke Skywalker visited that evening, bringing news that the rebellion had discovered a potential base site, an ice planet called Hoth, remote enough to avoid detection for a while. Han Solo had agreed to stay with the rebellion despite his claims of leaving, though he denied it was because of any personal attachment to people or causes. And Leia was organizing supply routes, recruitment drives, and intelligence operations. "The war continues," Luke said simply. "But we're still in it, thanks to you." "Thanks to all of us," Carol corrected. "I just bought the time. You destroyed the Death Star. Han saved your life. Wedge and the others fought alongside us. That's how this works. We all do our part." Luke smiled, that earnest, hopeful smile that reminded Carol why she fought. "Master Kenobi once told me that the Force will be with me always. I think it brought you here for a reason. Not to win the war alone, but to show us that power comes in many forms, that sometimes the strongest Force user in the galaxy needs help from someone who has no Force at all." Carol didn't have the heart to tell him she wasn't staying forever,
that somewhere in this galaxy there might be a way home, a dimensional rift or quantum anomaly that would let her return to her own universe. That every day she stayed was another day she wasn't protecting Earth, wasn't with the Avengers, wasn't living the life she'd fought so hard to build. But for now, for this moment, she was here, in a galaxy far, far away, fighting alongside rebels who'd become friends, protecting people she'd never met from an empire that had made destroying her a priority. Captain Marvel had fallen into the Star Wars galaxy by accident. She'd fought the Empire out of necessity. She joined the rebellion because some fights transcended dimensions and some causes were worth bleeding for. The Death Star was destroyed. Yavin 4 was evacuated. The rebellion survived to fight another day. And Carol Danvers, cosmically powered Avenger from a dimension beyond the stars, had learned the hardest lesson of all. That power without purpose was meaningless, that strength without sacrifice was hollow, and that sometimes the greatest victory was knowing when to trust others to be the heroes they were meant to be. The galaxy would remember the Battle of Yavin, would remember Luke Skywalker's impossible shot, Han Solo's last-minute rescue, and the rebellion's triumph over the Empire's ultimate weapon. But Carol would remember something else. The moment she had stood between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, absorbing fire meant for someone else, trusting that a farm boy guided by mystical energy could make a shot she couldn't make herself. The moment she'd learned that being Captain Marvel wasn't about being invincible. It was about choosing to protect, what to fight for, and when to let go of the need to solve everything alone. The Force had shown Luke his destiny. The war had shown the rebellion its purpose, and this galaxy, with all its impossibilities, its mystical energy, and its endless conflicts, had shown Carol Danvers something she needed to learn. That even someone who could punch through star destroyers sometimes needed to trust in powers greater than her own. The Empire would come for her again. Vader would hunt her. Thrawn would build his perfect trap, and the Emperor would eventually turn his full attention to the anomaly that disrupted his carefully ordered galaxy. Luke Skywalker visited that evening, bringing news that the rebellion had discovered a potential base site, an ice planet called Hoth, remote enough to avoid detection for a while. Han Solo had agreed to stay with the rebellion despite his claims of leaving, though he denied it was because of any personal attachment to people or causes. And Leia was organizing supply routes, recruitment drives, and intelligence operations. "The war continues," Luke said simply, "but we're still in it, thanks to you." "Thanks to all of us," Carol corrected. "I just bought the time. You destroyed the Death Star. Han saved your life. Wedge and the others fought alongside us. That's how this works. We all do our part." Luke smiled, that earnest, hopeful smile that reminded Carol why she fought. "Master Kenobi once told me that the Force will be with me always. I think it brought you here for a reason. Not to win the war alone, but to show us that power comes in many forms, that sometimes the strongest Force user in the galaxy needs help from someone who has no Force at all." Carol didn't have the heart to tell him she wasn't staying forever, that somewhere in this galaxy there might be a way home, a dimensional rift or quantum anomaly that would let her return to her own universe, that every day she stayed was another day she wasn't protecting Earth, wasn't with the Avengers, wasn't living the life she'd fought so hard to build. But for now, for this moment, she was here, in a galaxy far, far away, fighting alongside rebels who'd become friends, protecting people she'd never met from an empire that had made destroying her a priority. Captain Marvel had fallen into the Star Wars galaxy by accident. She'd fought the Empire out of necessity. She joined the rebellion because some fights transcended dimensions and some causes were worth bleeding for. The Death Star was destroyed. Yavin 4 was evacuated. The rebellion survived to fight another day. And Carol Danvers, cosmically powered Avenger from a dimension beyond the stars, had learned the hardest lesson of all.
that power without purpose was meaningless, that strength without sacrifice was hollow, and that sometimes the greatest victory was knowing when to trust others to be the heroes they were meant to be. The Force had shown